You're now tapped into the Instinctive Midnight Theory, where culture meets creativity beyond the algorithm. I'm your host, King Esseen, cultural creator, creative visionary. Here we honor the past, build the future, and connect the dots in between. Let's talk legacy. Let's talk story. Let's talk truth. Welcome to the theory.
My brother, the hardest working man and socially aware show business, entertainment, creativity, existentialism. Saul Williams, how are you, my brother?
You know I'm chilling, man. Don't even try it. Don't even try it. You know, we go back and I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about the times I've had to watch you rub cocoa butter all over your body getting out of the shower in Morehouse. You know what I'm saying? So
that was an art in itself.
The most lotion brother I've ever known.
But let me just say this. I learned from the best.
The times we had to wait, like, oh wait, we have to wait. You know, Esseen is still lotioning up.
I'm not coming out ashy, bro. I mean, y'all can give that
None
up.
of us were coming out ashy. It's just that you had 2 or 3 coats. You know what I'm saying?
No, some of us just have a natural sheen. That's it. You know, and you don't got to brag or rub folk nose in it. You know what I mean? How are you, man? You are a sight for sore eyes, a salve for sore ears, my brother. How are you, man?
I'm chilling, man. You know, I'm grateful, you know, to have the energy to face the moment and the times, and working to the best of my ability, kind of, as they say, firing from all engines. So, you know, working creatively, paying attention to all that's going on that is the opposite of creative, that is destructive in the world, and responding accordingly. You know, I mean, I know when nowadays when people think about, I guess, stuff that I've been doing, they think about stuff that I've been posting or what have you in relationship to what's happening in Gaza and Palestine and what have you, which is really, obviously that's not a job. I'm a poet, and as a poet, I'm a witness. And so I've essentially, you know, the amount of time that I spend browsing the news and what's happening in the world hasn't really shifted. I was doing that way before, you know, things started going down. I feel like I kind of just made my process transparent by saying, this is what I'm reading, this is what I'm thinking about. I used to not share everything that I was reading and think about, and then just come out with a few poems so that people go, wow, you know what I'm saying? But now I'm sharing what I'm reading and thinking about, but still, you know, working heavily on the creative end. So I've finished up 2 albums. I have one that's coming out the end of August, collaborating with my good friend Carlos Nino. It's a live album. It's actually a live album because it's a concert that we put together in December based on our excitement about the fact that we were about to go into the studio to record a studio album. And so the record company heard the live performance and was like, can we release this? And we said yes. And so it's coming out very soon in August, but there's also the studio album that will follow it up in 2026, which I'm extremely excited about as well, and which is done. There's that, and then I'm working on a book on art and politics that I have to hand in at the end of the month, at the end of
Deadlines, bro.
Deadline. And
deadline.
Yeah, exactly right. And so yeah, and then that corresponds with what you were telling me about your process of writing a book. Of course, I've written books before, books of poetry. I've never written a book of essays. And so this is a book of essays, and so it's a new challenge for me. to write in that way, in a more prose, linear-like fashion. And then there's the scripts that Anesia and I are working on in follow-up to our feature Neptune Frost, which came out in 2022. We're now in the development stage of actually a few new feature projects that she and I are writing. And in a nutshell, that's what's going on.
Okay, that's the nutshell. That is the synopsis, the summary, because we're about to walk through it. You know,
Let's walk
I'm
through
a
it, brother.
fan.
Let's walk through it.
I know. I mean, we're going to walk expeditiously, like Joe Clark.
Okay.
But I'm a fan of. I've always been a fan of your work. You know, you're my guy. As much as you get on my nerves, you're my guy.
Like that, bro. You're not allowed to talk like that. Always been a fan of your work.
No, I haven't. And listen, when we walk, no, this is true. But when we walk through it, you're gonna figure out how.
Okay.
See, my journey in terms of connecting the dots of awareness has illuminated me to a lot. In the process of writing this book, Cultural Alchemy, it occurred to me how important the journey is in terms of your awareness and creativity. And what I wanted to do today, because we're going to touch on all that work that I'm a fan of, not all, but a lot of the work that I'm a fan of, as well as your more recent work, which is amazing.
Right.
But I wanted to discuss your journey and connect the dots on what made you become the artist, creative, and the person, as well as the activist that you are. And I wanted to start with your family background and your initial surroundings, like your neighborhood, like
Sure.
how, tell me a little bit about them. Like, where's your family from?
Cool. So both of my parents were born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. However, my mother's family arrived in Brooklyn from Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
They came to Haiti, to New York City in 1919, to Ellis Island, in fact, during the U.S. occupation of Haiti. And wow. So my mother's family is 100% Haitian, and that's that. My dad's mother, my grandmother, came to Brooklyn from Smokes, South Carolina, around the same time, around 1919. And she moved there after she had lost her entire family. She became orphaned by the pandemic of 1918, which was the improper name of it is the Spanish flu, influenza, what have you. But yeah, her entire family died except for her, because she had the wherewithal to not eat from the same spoon that her mother was feeding her sisters with, and her father. And so she moved as an orphan to New York, and eventually gave birth to my dad. And then my dad and mom met. My father was a pastor of a Baptist church. My mother's a school teacher, and I was raised in the city where my father pastored a church, which is a city called Newburgh, New York, which is about an hour upstate from New York City. Newburgh is a very dear place to my heart. It's a beautiful city. It's a city that was dreamt of as being the sort of the playground, the weekend playground for the rich during the Gilded Age of New York City. This is before they changed their mind and instead decided to build their weekend homes in Long Island. Right. And so before that, a number of those families from the Gilded Age hired extremely popular architects to build their homes in Newburgh. And so Newburgh has a lot of beautiful old homes, and I ended up growing up in one.
Ah, beautiful. Okay.
Madison Square Garden. He built the Arch in Washington Square Park, and he was murdered in 1906. And that's a whole story. There's a film that kind of covers that called Ragtime, but it's
Oh yeah.
story. But my parents bought that house for $30,000 in the mid to late 70s, and then realized that they were out of their minds because they were going to have to pay to heat it. And so I grew up very cold. A
lot of blankets.
With a lot of blankets, and you know, my mom sometimes putting our jeans in the oven in the morning before
People don't. That stuff works.
Oh yeah, before she woke us up for school, like, wait, time to wake up, you know, like your clothes are warm.
You're right.
But you
that'll
know,
get you. That'll get you from under here.
Yeah, you know, but there was a documentary that was done on Newburgh in the 2000s that was crazy. That was called Crackhead University, and yeah, you know, and it's true that, you know, Newburgh is really the crossroads of the prison system upstate, and New Jersey, Connecticut are all very close, and so a lot of stuff traffics through Newburgh, and then, you know, there's a huge hood in Newburgh that kind of, you know, I would say when I was growing up, kind of overcompensated for the fact that they were not in the city proper, by bopping harder, shooting faster, stabbing quicker. And so I grew up, you know, in this environment, kind of protected, loved, respected by friends because I was rapping, and they were like, nah, but he can rap, you know, and breakdancing and shit. And
well, real quick, let's talk about that, because you're multi-talented, but what I wanted to ask you was, in terms of the spark for you, your creative and performance inspiration, what was it first? Was it music, dance, drama?
Right. Yeah, it's actually all the same exact time. I'm very clear on that. One, because I'm working on this book, so I've had to interrogate that question, and I have a very specific answer. It's third grade.
Okay.
When I was in third grade,
awesome.
One, I started rapping. Two, I was at a magnet school. I started the magnet school in third grade, and they had a class called Shake Hands with Shakespeare, which I'd signed up for, and we were responsible for school plays. And I got cast as Mark Antony in Julius Caesar. And as soon as we sat down for rehearsals, learning the script, you know, like breaking down the language, all the different layers of meaning, sitting around the table, discussing the beats and motivations and objectives of the characters and what was happening at the time, and, you know, what this line meant and how that corresponded with what was happening, and blah, 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 blah. I love that. That was like, I found it amazing. And I came home from school one day and sat at the dinner table, third grade, and said, I want to be an actor when I grow up. And my father didn't miss a beat. He said, I'll support you as an actor if you get a law degree.
It's almost like he was ready for you.
He was ready for me. My father had gone to the School of Music and Art. He went to school with Saul Williams at the Fame School. He had trained as an opera singer, and he in fact was a regular on a TV show on NBC as a kid in the 50s called Star Time Kids, where he would sing. It was a variety show with kids, and he would sing opera as a young, like, opera prodigy. But then got called into the ministry in his late teens, and you know, went a different route. So he was kind of prepared, like, you know, it may hit my kid.
Right. Might be in the blood.
That was his response. But my mom, without missing a beat, had a response to my dad. And this is the response that answers all of your question and changes the trajectory of my whole path. When he says, I'll support you as an actor if you get a law degree, my mom says, oh, then you should do your next school report on Paul Robeson. He was an actor and a lawyer. And I did. I did my next school report on Paul Robeson. And with that report, which raised many questions like, what is socialism? What is
Right.
communism? What does it mean to be blacklisted by the government? You can get blacklisted for being a singer. You can be blacklisted for speaking up about the truth. All of these questions, right? Because Paul Robeson was talking about, I'm only going to do independent theater, independent movies in the 1930s. In the
At that time.
1930s, because he
Yeah.
was talking about what Hollywood was doing to promote and propagate ideas surrounding Black people then,
Mhm.
and realized that art does serve as propaganda, and it doesn't disempower the artist to acknowledge that. What it does is you have to realize that if it is going to serve as propaganda, then you need to embed your work with enough propaganda that
To
focuses
counterbalance.
on to counteract
Yes.
the other propaganda. This is why, the Black Power movement inspired so many artists to sing about Black power and Black is beautiful and all that, because they started realizing that art could serve as propaganda, which means that it could serve to propagate the ideas that were necessary for our community to blossom and resist, the injustices that were being, harbored against us.
Mhm.
I mean, it's W.E.B. Du Bois who said in 1926, like, I don't give a damn about art unless it serves as propaganda, because the other side is doing nothing but it. And that's why, you understand? So
He was
and we
absolutely
grew up with that.
aware.
We grew up with like
Mhm.
Public Enemy, for an example, KRS-One. So many of the artists were clear on that. Like, no, I need to embed my music with ideas so that you cannot walk away from it without thinking, oh shit. Like, remember the first time you heard KRS say, a vegetarian, no goat or ham, or chicken or turkey or hamburger? Because to me, that's suicide, self-murder.
I
Right?
almost jumped out of my chair.
Yeah.
Because
1987, my
right.
philosophy.
See the point. One of the many key points that you're making is these artists, speaking of our generation, were giving these messages and giving propaganda in absence of a movement. Our context did not have a movement. Like when you think
Yeah.
of
No, hip hop
late
became the
60s
movement.
and early 70s,
Yeah.
they had a movement as a context. We had Public Enemy, KRS-One, Eric B.
Yes,
and
because
Rakim.
COINTELPRO, because the government had worked to
Right,
kill the leaders of the movement and had moved and did the best they could to turn what was once a movement into gangs,
right.
right?
And
Into
and a
rival
drug and a
gangs like the
drug.
FBI, the COINTELPRO. They
Right.
did their job. They did their job between
Hmm.
drugs and disinformation and all this type of shit, that our communities were embedded with. They did their job. And
Right.
we know that. This is the shit that always, So anyway, when my mom said that, I went down that path and realized that, as an actor, even the choices that I would make in terms of what I would play was
Hmm.
important, So that from then on, it was clear. And so from then on, I'm also, and I didn't necessarily carry it over to everything. I still enjoyed a lot of bullshit in music. I still enjoy a lot of bullshit in music, like
Hmm.
we can hear shit and be like, yeah, they're not saying shit, but it's beautiful. I
Right.
like the vibe. It's
That's
all
our little
vibe.
outlet.
But I did gain that criticism, which was enhanced when I was at Morehouse Spelman, really on Spelman's campus, that made me listen to what people were saying. You remember the conversations of we be trying to blast shit and they'd be like, yeah, but did you hear what he said?
And big shout to Zenna, to
Hello. Then
because Zenna was
Key.
the one who
Yeah.
pinned us to the wall. Like all of that Ghetto Boys and all that y'all listening to, it is absolutely misogynistic. We're like, what's that? You know what I mean? We've been
Yeah,
programmed so much
exactly. We had been extremely programmed.
that we
Um,
weren't even aware of the
yeah.
damage.
Yeah. And then you
But they made us
become
aware.
mad at your awareness because you're like, shit, can't I have fun? But
Which will make you think critically about that. Is that fun?
yeah,
That's fun. Why is it fun?
why is it
And
fun? Exactly.
I
Exactly.
remember you specifically as we started to mature, asking people questions. Because I remember like Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg came into
Oh my
popularity,
God.
and people were, singing songs like "Zayn," and you were asking younger students like, "Why do you like this? Why do?" And
And
see,
I knew why. These are rhetorical questions. I knew I'm from New York. That song
right,
samples The Bridge. You know what I'm saying? It was one of the
true,
dopest beats on the album, which is like, which is seductive because I love a good beat. You know what I'm saying? I was identifying as a dancer at the time, but I also had Pearl Clegg as a teacher at the time
right,
who had walked into class one time and been like, I heard a student on Spelman campus blasting "Bitches Ain't Shit"
right.
on my, yeah. What the hell are y'all doing? And she had just come out with a book called Mad at Miles, where she was
Oh yeah,
interrogating whether she could appreciate Miles Davis knowing his relationship to women. Like these were
Cicely
questions at
Tyson, yeah.
hand. We were forced to reckon with these questions, and it made us better. It made us think. These are the same questions that I raised when I heard rappers that I love, some of them, going on and on about selling crack. And I was like, wait, but we all know that the CIA brought crack into our community. Nigga,
With
you telling me that,
deindustrialization, yeah.
yeah. So are you telling me that you work for the CIA? That was always my thing. Like, you telling me you work for the CIA? I should admire you because you worked for the CIA. You sold
Deep.
crack. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is no judgment on you. Nigga, it's all judgment, but you know what I'm saying.
I do. Now, it makes me want to ask you something. You brought up growing up, being into music, dance, drama, then going to college. And I just remember personally how transformative that was for me. Leaving your parents' house,
Of course.
being amongst your peers who were great, charismatic, smart, and it can be challenging because we don't all come, I mean, unless you come from a very special place, you don't come from a place like the AUC where it's, for lack of a uh, less passe term, Black excellence surrounding you. And I remember, as much as I love being around
Yeah.
you all,
Uh-huh.
y'all got on my nerves because steel sharpens steel. But it was great.
Mhm.
Like I wouldn't have traded it for anything. But I just remember, being frustrated by being challenged by my peers, but also being impressed. Like I remember walking through campus one time and we were singing the Samande beat, the bro, dun, 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 dun. I know you remember that.
Yeah.
And you freestyled for like 15 minutes and I just looked at you like, this dude raps too? I mean, he's an excellent dancer, but this dude can rap.
You know what's funny? When I got to Morehouse, the year I got there, I had quit rapping because I was 18 and I was like, I'm too old.
Oh yeah, it's a cutoff.
Yeah. I'm too old. I'm too old.
Right.
Oh well.
Time to move on. That's deep.
Time to move on. Yeah, we did encounter a lot of wonderful talents. I mean, the thing that would get me was on the dance floor. I'd see some cats where I'd just be like, yo,
Right.
how do I learn how to do that on the dance floor? You know how much we were at them clubs, bro, to the point of where we started throwing parties. But yeah, that's where I'd be like, yo, that I need to practice.
Right.
Like
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I want to balance it out because yes, we were surrounded by a lot of talent. We were also surrounded by a lot of nonsense. There was a lot of elitism there. I would say that my greatest lessons came from the interpersonal connections with people like you, and we ended up living together and all of that type of stuff.
Right.
But also primarily from the influence of the sisters and professors that I had at Spelman. And I had a very specific experience because I was a drama major, and Morehouse didn't have a drama department at the time. So 100% of my classes for my major were on Spelman's campus.
We were like, he's lucky.
I spent an inordinate amount of time there. And it was those professors that were bringing out, like when you say, what is misogyny? All of this stuff, that had me like on my toes and really like, oh, wow. That really opened my ears and eyes, because, like you said, they were also bringing that critique to contemporary culture. They were bringing that critique to the music. They were bringing that critique to how we speak amongst ourselves and how we, handle ourselves, when we are away from our parents, because that's the time also when we're stepping into ourselves. I know part of my excitement at being at school was stepping into things, even linguistically, like language and all this type of shit, because I didn't have to correct myself anymore. I was no longer around my parents and the church. I can now, speak how I imagine I should be speaking and all of this type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? We're all like being that full time, being ourselves full time now.
Right.
And yeah. I mean, yeah, we did the occasion. We had to change it up a little bit for our teachers, but for the most part, it was extremely special. But it was also, I also am very clear on the fact that there was a lot of nonsense that they were trying to teach us too. A lot of that falls under the realm of Black excellence. I can't use terms like that now because I think so much about, those people that commandeered the term that used it, to promote their billionaire status and all that type of stuff. You know what I'm talking about. But people who we always smelt were like, nah.
Right, because we remember you from before.
Exactly. But yeah.
Now,
that was
there's something It was. And before I move forward, because I want to talk about when you moved to New York to study drama, I didn't want to skip over your year abroad in Brazil, because I feel like that was impactful for you too.
That was before I came to Morehouse. That was my junior year of high school. I was an exchange student, and I did that because my sister had been an exchange student her junior year when I was in third grade.
Wow.
And so that spark was lit then, because when she announced that she was going, I was like, what? Where is Brazil?
Where are you going? Yeah.
What is that? What language do they speak? What are you talking about? You're going away, my eldest sister. And so I was like, well, I want to do that. So when I finally could, when I was a junior, at 16 years old, I moved to Brazil for a year. And yes, in terms of my relationship to music, in terms of my relationship to US culture and imperialism and kind of understanding the role that America plays outside of America, because, I would be surrounded by young Brazilians who would just want to ask questions about the US. Like, what is it like? Is it really like the movies? Is it really like the movies? That was the huge question. That, and then I'd also get occasionally asked, what's it like to be sprayed with a fire hose? Because they had seen images of our people from the civil rights movement. And I'd have to be like, oh, no, that's my parents. That's not me. I don't know. I've never been sprayed with the fire hose. That was my parents. It was a consistent question that I was asked, along with other questions about whether America was really the land of the free. Were we really free? All of this stuff, is it really like in the movies? Like, they had been hit with all of this US propaganda through art.
Right.
Through art, through cinema.
Media,
through media. Not to mention that, I lived in a small town in the south of Brazil where all the food in the supermarket I learned came from a 30-mile radius within the surroundings, right? But it was kind of an agricultural paradise. And I remember seeing like fruit I hadn't seen before, but also the some of the oranges or mangoes and stuff like that were sometimes bananas browning. And I was like, oh, wow, it seems like the fruit, I know the fruit is fresher here, but it's not as bright as in the States. And they were like, oh, that's because of the toxins, that you guys did. And, you know, this is the fruit that we send here. The majority of our fruit is going to the United States. The majority of these farms are owned by corporations from the United States. And so I was learning so much about the US's power outside of the US while I was there. I was also, it was a huge lesson in class consciousness. You know, there was, at that time, there was hardly a middle class in Brazil. There was like the very rich and the very poor. You're familiar with the favelas and what have you, you know, and so I was living with families that were way wealthier than anything I had ever experienced in my lifetime. But then interacting with kids, because I saw kids that looked like me, who were living on a scale of you know, socially induced poverty, that was also very different from me as a Northeasterner and what I had been exposed to. And so, you know, it was just eye-opening on many ways. And so I came back from Brazil, did my senior year of high school, and then went to Morehouse. But yeah, as a result, you know, I came there, you know, already into capoeira. I came there already into samba and bossa nova, and like having just a bit of an understanding of music beyond my immediate New York hip hop head experience.
Right. And that was impactful to me. I feel like that influenced me. I had a lot of interest in Brazil from periphery, media, film and such, but then seeing encountering you and you having traveled, and then a very interesting thing that I remember, I don't know if you remember, Zina, who I mentioned earlier, we were all hanging out and she had traveled abroad to a Spanish speaking country. And you all had a conversation but using Portuguese and Spanish, and you were able to navigate through it. And I thought that was the most interesting thing.
Yeah. It's that's the you know, the Romance languages, as they call it. They all have that Latin root. And so yeah, ever since I learned Portuguese, I've had a working understanding of Spanish, even though I wouldn't be able to speak it per se, beyond a few sentences here and there. But my understanding, the similarities in the words, I can make out what's being said. Yeah,
I know what you mean. So okay, let's spring forward to your graduate school experience, moving to New York, and your foray into poetry. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So yeah, because that's an interesting thing, right? So as you know, the real foray to poetry happened before I went there, because you were part of the crew, Red Clay, where we started.
Right. I didn't want to forget.
Yeah, it's true. We started a zine while we were at Morehouse and Spelman. A collective of us, of students from Morehouse, Spelman, and Clark, started a zine called Red Clay. And I had a section in there called Hung, where I would write a poem and then an essay. And Biafra, our friend Biafra, had kind of, I remember she took us to a poetry reading in Atlanta, and they were critiquing each other's poems. It was elders, and I was like, wow, that's very crazy, you know, like, because the critiques were hardcore.
Right.
Really hardcore. Like, you are repeating imperial propaganda when you say that line, blah, blah, blah. You know, I was just hearing people get critiqued, like, whoa.
Like, I don't want to say mine.
Yeah. But I was nowhere near about, you know, ready to recite a poem or anything like that. But then when I went to grad school at NYU, during my first year there, actually after spring break, no, before spring break, during my first year there, the first semester, I met a girl who invited me to go hear her boyfriend read a poem at a poetry reading in New York. And I had nothing better to do. I didn't have a lot of friends outside of my, you know, the students I was studying with. There were 17 of us. I was eager to meet new people. I was living in Brooklyn. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go. And so I went to this poetry reading, It was in October of 1994. And at this poetry reading, I ended up seeing on stage a guy we now call Esseen Bey.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up seeing a guy who was then called and is still called Talib Kweli. I saw Mums the Schemer. I saw Sapphire, the writer who wrote Precious and is an extraordinary poet. Tish Benson, Carl Hancock Rux, Jessica Caramore. There were so many poets that I met that night. I didn't really meet them all. I witnessed them.
Right.
And they inspired me. And I thought, oh, at NYU, we had been encouraged to keep a journal. And as I was listening to them read their poems and they were blowing my mind, I was looking at my journal and going, wow, I probably could read one of my journal entries. My journal entries kind of reads like some of the stuff they're saying on stage. Because I was recording epiphanies and all this type of stuff, but it wasn't in the context of poetry. It was just journal entries. I didn't have any plan to do anything with it. But once I saw these poets, I was like, oh, maybe I could do that. So that's in October of 94. I run with that idea. And so now in my journal, I'm sort of crafting my epiphanies and notes into a poem. I won't say into poems. I was working on a poem, so that if I ever encounter a poetry reading like that again, I would have something to read. And so a lot of time passed. That was October. It wasn't until March of 1995, so a few months, where I was coming back from spring break, where I had spent a week or 2 weeks in the forest with Scott, our other roommate. In the Olympic Peninsula. He was teaching in Seattle. Remember when he was teaching in Seattle?
Right. Hands Across America, or Teach Across America?
America something. I forget what it was called.
Right.
Not Hands Across America.
No, that was the festival. I don't know what made me think of that. Was it Teach America?
Teach America. There it is. Teach America.
Okay. Yeah.
There it is. And
Farm Aid.
No, I'm thinking of, what is that? Jordan Peele Nope or whatever, or where they do their Hands Across America or whatever. But anyway, I spent a week in the forest with him, and I was still working on a poem. But that week I was with Scott, so I was smoking a lot of weed and listening to Lee Scratch Perry and Jimi Hendrix and Forest, and and I was starting to, the poem was starting to feel like something to me. I was there, I stand on the corner of the block slinging amethyst rocks, and I was like, oh shit, this is something. The day I flew back, which was March 16th, 1995, I'm coming back from JFK. I take the bus to the train. I get off in Brooklyn. I'm dragging my bag back to my apartment. And as I'm dragging my bag out of the subway, I pass a storefront window that's foggy. It's a cafe that I'd been meaning to check out before I left, but I'd never been inside. And now it was really foggy, where I was like, oh shit, there must be something going on in there, because the windows are steaming. I'm gonna put my bag down, get a veggie patty, and see what's up. I did that. I put my bag down, get a veggie patty. I go to that thing, I open the door, and homegirl's boyfriend, the one who had invited me to the poetry reading in October, was the host of a poetry reading at this spot, which was on Fulton Ave in Brooklyn, called the Brooklyn Moon. And I saw Esseen, who was up there reading a poem, and a bunch of the cats that I had seen that night were at this small little cafe reading poems. It was a Friday night. And so the dude sees me. I had met him that night. He was like, yo, you want to read something? I got room on the list. He's like, I got one more name. I was like, yeah, put me on.
Ready.
And I was the last person to read. I remember that it's March 16th, 1995, because I'd finished that poem about standing on the corner of the block slinging amethyst rocks, which is eventually the poem that I read in the courtyard scene in Slam. And I read that poem, which is the first poem I'd written. And I had a experience that was kind of like the Matrix, I would describe it, you know, where it's like slow motion, you're watching the bullets pass, I'm watching the words fly out, I'm watching them hit people, I see a woman in the front row crying, I see all this shit. And me, mind you, I'm in grad school for acting. What I had peeped in all of the people before me was a sort of shyness of like, yeah, I just wrote this poem, and, you know, all this type of stuff. Whereas me, like, at that point, I'd spent the majority of my life on stage. So I was very comfortable with the idea of performing. I just wasn't necessarily used to performing my own words or breaking the fourth wall, meaning looking at the audience, right? But that's what we were going to do. Right before I went on stage, I was like, I think I have this memorized. I closed my journal, put it in my pocket, and read the poem. As I mentioned, I was the last poet of the night. When I got off stage, one person walked up to me crying and was like, thank you. And then another person came up to me and was like, hey, we got a Mary Baraka and Sonia Sanchez doing a reading at Medgar Evers University, and we'd love for you to open up for them. I was like, sure. Someone else came up to me and said, hey, the Fujis and KRS-One are doing Rock Against Racism in Union Square. I'm the programmer there. I'd love for you to open up for them. It's like, sure. Someone else came up to me and said, hey, Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets are performing at SOBs on this date. I'd love for you to open up for them. Sure. Someone else came up to me and said, yeah, Allen Ginsberg is doing this reading at NYU on this date. I'd love for you to open up for him. I had one poem, bro. This is March 16th, 1995. I remember it because the trajectory of my entire relationship to performance had shifted beyond, you know, I mean, granted, this is the first year of acting school, meaning I had 2 years to go, and I was very focused on that. My intent and first love is theater. I was very focused on, you know, becoming a better actor. But now I had this quote unquote side hustle, which was, oh, I'm being asked to read poems. I gotta write more poems.
Right.
And
I was going to ask about what the catalyst was to becoming more prolific as a writer, but go ahead.
The catalyst to becoming more prolific as a writer is reading. It's reading. That's the unsaid in all this story, is that when I got out of college, I suddenly, and when I was in grad school at NYU, because we would spend months just studying a single play or something like that, I suddenly had a lot of time on my hands to read all the books that I heard about. And normally would only read in the summer when I had time to read, aside from college assignments and all that type of stuff. So finally, all these books that I was embarrassed to not have read, whatever, Herman Hesse, Siddhartha, you know, whatever. I was like, I'm going to read that. And being at NYU, you know, they're selling books for $2, $3 outside of the library on the sidewalk. So I would just buy books like, oh, I always wanted to read this philosopher. I always wanted to read this by Mary Baraka. I always wanted to read this, you know, by Jane Cortez. I always wanted to read this. And books would come out of conversations. I'd be like, oh, yeah. And when is the new Octavia Butler coming out? And then all this stuff. So I was reading. My writing was really reflecting everything I was reading. And to this day, it still is. Reading is the praxis. This
is so informative for me, because I always knew you to be intelligent. You were very much an active listener, but when you started writing prolifically and doing poetry, I remember thinking, was he hiding all this? Was he hiding all this knowledge, all this diverse knowledge? I was like, this dude, see, and I was like, it's just like him, man. He just want to hide it, and then he's going to spring it on us.
No, that's the thing, is that through reading Baldwin, all of this stuff that, you know, me and Kwame, another one of our friends and roommates, you know,
yeah,
Kwame,
that's the Four Musketeers,
you know, yeah. And so he'd be like, yo, I just picked up this book by Ben Okri. You got to pick it up. you know, so we were going back and forth and stuff we were reading. And
Right.
all of this stuff was kind of a confirmation of ideas that were fermenting in my mind, but I hadn't really had the time to really or properly, you know, sit with. And so these authors, people like, you know, granted, I was a huge reader before that, but like I said, a lot of reading when you're in school was during the summer, you know, and I would
Right.
spend my summers reading Alice Walker and Octavia Butler and all of that.
Right.
And we were lucky to be turned on to Octavia Butler as like young teenagers way before, you know what I'm saying? Like as it was coming out. And so that was always exciting. We were already on that. But then I was reading Samuel Delany. I was reading, you know, there was more stuff that I hadn't encountered or heard of, you know,
Right.
and through conversation, someone else would be like, oh, you should really read this, you know, all of this stuff. And so I was deep diving in terms of reading right at the moment that I began writing poetry. And I would even say that a lot of the poems, a lot of my earliest poems, and to this day still are notes that I take while reading.
That's
It's really
why.
notes. You know, it's the same. You know, people used to. I studied philosophy at Morehouse, and they would talk about how Aristotle, you know, who's credited for writing all this stuff, a lot of the stuff that he's given credit for is really just notes that he was taking as he was there, you know, helping Alexander destroy these books in Egypt. You know, he'd be like, let me read this first, let me take a few notes. And a lot of the stuff he's given credit for would actually be notes that come from previously written texts. So I was, you know, kind of remixing, and of course also having a lot of epiphanies, because I think the imagination and being in acting school was really a lot of the first year of acting school. I would say maybe the majority of it is spent in improvisation. And so my imagination was already running wild. Like a quick example of a day at my grad acting school would be like, we'd arrive at class at 9 a.m. and the teacher would be like, oh, that's great. You know, today is Harry Belafonte's birthday, and I'm so excited to learn that you guys are putting on the annual television performance in celebration of Harry Belafonte's life. And so everybody outside, we're gonna have. I need to see 4 commercial breaks, and yeah, class is 3 hours today, and oh my gosh, it's the countdown to the beginning of the show. Here we go. And he's the only audience. Or whoever's not in the scene is in the audience, right? But we just had to perform. Welcome to our show. You know what I'm saying? Like off the top of the head. And it would start getting good. We would start getting good. We would start getting really imaginative. We would start really feeding off of each other. We would start having crazy commercials and like, you know, all this stuff. But the imagination is like a muscle. It's like a muscle. So I felt like I was in the gym every day, developing that muscle. So that I also feel like a lot of the earliest poems also reflect that sort of thing of like, oh no, all I'm doing with my time is improvising on stage and reading and taking notes in my journal. And the epiphanies in between would get more and more poetic, so to speak, you know? But the fact that I had found an outlet, because I bonded with all those people, you know, at the Brooklyn Moon, I bonded with all of them immediately. We all saw each other as the thing we were looking for. Like, oh, this is where hip hop went, because this corresponds with the time, which hadn't happened before, where suddenly we're critical of the hip hop they play on the radio.
Right.
That's what happens mid-90s. Is suddenly, because before the mid-90s, all the hip hop on the radio we were excited to hear, because all hip hop was underground. All of it, you know. But now, with the Chronic and all that, there was suddenly this mainstream hip hop, and a lot of the stuff that we had loved and all that was now being called underground or backpacker and all that, and it was, you know,
it had become fractured.
Yeah, it became fractured, and so as part of that fracture, the question was, where have all the lyricists gone? And the lyricists I found in New York were at the poetry readings. And we were like, yo, I don't even want to be. Like, Just listen. Pure lyricism, you know? And so we were exciting each other. We were running lines. Me and Esseen would be like, yo, he'd be like, yo, I got this new one, listen. And he just give an opening line of a song, something that eventually became a song or something. But really, it was just the new moon shone high over the sky of the metropolis, shining like who's on top of this? You know what I'm saying? Like all this type of stuff where you're just like, yo, yes. We were just, I'd hesitate to call it corny, but looking back, I'm like, gosh, we were kind of, we were unafraid to show how excited we were about language and how we were using it. And we also felt like, because we were also suddenly like, there was an interesting thing going on because a lot of us were connected to hip hop people like Wu-Tang or De La, what have you. Esseen wasn't connected to all of them. And he used to throw poetry readings that they would come to listen to us. And they listened to us and loved us out loud, partially because we did not identify as rappers. So we were not competition.
Right. You had your own realm and lane.
We had our own lane. There was no problem for them to love us. So I remember cats like J. Rue and all these cats that we love. You know how much time we would spend, or Guru, all these people that we would spend imitating and reciting and all this stuff, suddenly coming up to us and being like, yo, man, I really love your poetry, bro. And I'd be like, me? I could recite all of your lyrics.
For sure.
Don't make me recite your lyrics to you, Guru.
Right. Don't ask me if I'm Muslim.
Don't ask me if I'm Muslim. Don't say nothing to me.
We used to walk up on each other. Right. I remember you and I would walk up on each other and try to rush and say it first. Like, because whoever said it first was like dissing them.
Yeah. But that stuff, I said I was raised like that, son. I had your cousins. They pushed me to find myself, or else they knew I wasn't going
to make it. Right. See now,
a statistic. My life was twisted. I almost missed it. The chance. It's the chance.
But now I have KNOW. Now see, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. But
that road, yes.
Right. See, what you said about the focus on lyricism and the excitement about it, you really point out the importance of context, because I know that being that I stayed in Atlanta and I was working with Messiah a lot and with Zulu Nation and all that, it was heavily about music. So when I was hearing this lyrical movement coming out of New York, as impressed as I was with the skill level, I wasn't as turned on. But I'm sure that if I was there in that context, I would have been more stimulated and inspired, because I didn't, when I would see how excited everybody was about the lyricism, I was like, yeah, it's cool, but could I listen to that all night? I'm sure if I was in that mix, I could.
Yeah. Of course. The fact is that at that time, it was like we were workshopping ideas. And so we were listening to each other all night and we were inspiring each other. And the diversity of the voices in the early stages of the poetry movement at that time was so beautiful. There were so many women, there were so many, there were so many out gay men and women. There was all of these voices that some of which you weren't hearing in hip hop. Were all welcome, including elders. There were leftovers from the beatnik era and what have you, who would show up at the poetry readings too. Like, I got a poem, young man. And they'd be amazing. They'd be amazing. You know what I'm saying? There were all these Ani DeFranco fans, who were coming from another direction.
Independence, yeah.
A whole different relationship. Like some of us had ended up there because through our love of hip hop, some through their love of literature, some through their just being outcast and it being the only thing that welcomed them. There were all these different people. And so it was like, it kind of felt like a skate park. You know what I'm saying? It kind of felt like a skate park. And it was it was, you know, it was extremely beautiful while at the same time really hood and elevated, and a lot of sharing was going on, you know. So because also the elders would show up. The elders would show up. I remember Sonia Sanchez showing up at the Brooklyn Moon, you know, the elders would show up. And so that was shocking too, because we had studied these people since we were children. You know, these are names that have been in our household since we were children. Our parents would tell us about Sonia Sanchez and Mary Baraka and you know, Larry Neal and all, you know, all these people from the Black Arts movement, and suddenly we're interacting with them the same way we were with you know, with Uhuru.
Oh yeah.
At Morehouse, you know, meeting these people that had meant so much to specific moments of the struggle for liberation for Black people, you know. And so it also felt important, but it was, you know, but most of us were extremely connected to the music. I remained connected to the music. My conversations still remained very much about music. And it wasn't long after that that I started trying to make sense of music. So at first, when I first started writing poetry, I wasn't connecting it to music. I was connecting it to like what I could explore when I wasn't within the prison of a beat. I started looking at beats as a prison. Like shit, when I don't write to a beat, I'm writing all over the place. And then I heard Tricky. Then I heard Portishead. Then I heard drum and bass. Basically, then I heard a bunch of that UK shit that opened my mind to the possibility of, oh, we can make beats like this too. Not just UK shit, right? Too, because RZA was a part of, you know, for me, really opened something for me too. But I lived in New York, so I was bombarded with it. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that we had to search to find what was coming from, you know, overseas and what have you, and then hearing it, knowing that they were inspired by stuff that we had done in New York, but this is how they were interpreting it with these crooked ass beats and talking over it in the whole nine, was like, oh yeah, music is wide open, bro. Music is wide open, actually.
Now, you know, it's almost an injustice. We don't want to keep you too long, and to me, it feels like an injustice to skip over some of what you ended up doing, acting-wise, in film and such. But I wanted us, without a doubt, to touch on, and you led up to it, speaking about this new musical sound and the bending and shaping of beats. It relates to me to what ended up presenting itself in your work in the realm of Afrofuturism. I wanted to make sure that you talked about that today.
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, it's funny, you know, it's like, it's great that we have these new terms that we can throw around, you know, but you and I were both super into Kool Keith before we knew what Afrofuturism was.
Before it was a term. Yep.
For example, meaning that we were looking for the most interesting interpretations of Blackness, devoid of a colonial or white gaze that was just far out, far out. That's what Jimi Hendrix is, you know. That's what Nina Simone is. That's what Kool Keith was. That's what Sun Ra is. That's what Octavia Butler is on the page. You know what I'm saying? We were always into, you know, like we talk about Divine Styler. We used to talk about Divine Styler, right? Autumn Spirals of Light.
Mystic Sheep, drink electric tea.
Yeah, we were hanging out with Dell. Remember, we were hanging out with Dell, another alien. Yeah, our boy Kwame was managing Dell at the time while we were at Morehouse, and he would bring Dell, you know, to hang with us. And that was another one who was like on one. On one.
He was a thought leader.
Yeah. And so it was always there as something that we were looking for, something that I saw as expansive and in the expanded definition of who we are, that connection to the unseen, just as our connection is to the spiritual realm and mysticism and rhythm itself is mystical, and polyrhythm. I mean, we haven't talked about how much we would lose our minds anytime we heard Fela through speakers, you know, like that's
in barefoot ballet.
Hello? Come on, man. Come on.
Salah and I were just talking about that the other week.
Between Fela and Pal Joey.
Where we had to drag you out of a masquerade.
Dude, you know
when we first heard hot music.
You know that's the
first
week
week
of school?
It
that's
was.
The first week of school.
On the back of a pickup truck.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the week
to see
we
DJ
met.
Disciple.
That's the week we met. I'll never forget that night at the masquerade because I heard Pal Joey and Fela both for my first time at that party. And it's 3 a.m. and everybody's tired. And we just heard the boom, din, 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 ha. And I'm like, yo, we can't leave. What the hell is this? What the hell is this? You know,
you heard it more than the rest of us. We heard it. And to us, it's just another dope beat. You were like, that's the best thing I've ever heard. And I was like, you know what I mean? But it made sense later. It became the thing. Later, didn't it? And we even had a signature dance for it.
Don't bring it up.
It's hard, bro. I'm holding back. But go ahead.
Yeah. We were.
I still do it.
I remember. But yeah, I mean, that's a classic at this moment. But hearing it for the first time that night, and then walking to the door, and right as one body, I think Scott may have already been headed out the door, and then the DJ goes, Fela Lady. What was I supposed to do?
This is why we came here. This is why we moved to this city.
I think that's a speech that I gave you all. Like, this is why we came. We can't.
I believe so.
We can't leave.
We had to literally drag you out.
Yeah, because they were playing Fela, bro. They were playing Fela. I remember, you know, to the chagrin of every DJ we then encountered afterwards, I was like, do you have hot music and do you have any Fela?
See, that is you. Requests.
I know
but sincere requests.
But they were foolish not to play it because anytime they did, you know, they owned the party.
Right.
It led to us throwing parties so that we could, you know, play what we wanted. SOL.
Exactly. That was actually impactful on us, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing, which, that was crazy. That was crazy. Tairi, all those people that came through as DJs on that was wild.
Definitely.
Yeah.
See, but your work, I'm jumping a bit, but I remember taking friends to see Neptune Frost multiple times. And I remember even with the cerebral energy, like barely being able to contain myself because I knew what you were doing and I knew what you were imparting, and it was a lot. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, that's for you could have said the same thing like the first time you heard coded language or whatever, or saw slam. I was trying to squeeze everything that excited me into the package, saying this may be the last opportunity I have to speak to people from this stage. In terms of cinema, the excitement for Anesia and myself was, these are the things that I would love to see on screen.
Yes.
Imagine if somebody said this in a movie. Imagine if you heard a conversation like this in a movie. Imagine if the music was approached this way in the movie. Imagine if the images move like this in a movie. These were all these things that we were excited that we had never seen before. So that we were basically working to excite ourselves. But in knowing that we would be delivering something to people that are hungry for it, whether they realize it or not, right? Whether you realize it or not, you don't realize that you never, wait, have I ever seen a film without white people in it? Wait, have I ever heard a film in an indigenous African language? Wait, have I ever seen costumes made out of computer part? Wait, have I ever heard, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's those things. It's those things. And so for me, you know, every opportunity, you know, like I keep hearing in my head, like, oh my man, niggas, put your hands up, put your hands up. And I'm always like, if you have everybody's attention, is that all you're going to say?
It's like KRS said, am I going to get up here and waste my nation's time?
Hello. Yeah. So that's the thing, is that all of these opportunities, once these things get greenlit, once we reach a point where it's like, oh shit, we're making it. Oh shit, it's going to be released. It's always been a matter of trying to formulate something that lasts and that touches people in a way that they've never been touched, that heals, that soothes, that excites, that elevates, you know, because it's all pointing towards something. And that something, yes, is our liberation. We still are part of the same struggle. Everything we were fighting for when we met, we're still fighting for it. Yes. We might be closer to losing it now than we were then.
Deep.
It's crazy, you know? And so I leave you with this thing, you know, that inspired me around the time that I first started writing poetry, and it became the test, and music and everything else, and it became the test for myself that I would give to anything that I wrote. It was in one of Maya Angelou's books where she was talking about the writing group that she had with James Baldwin and Tony Cade Bambara and a number of other writers in Harlem. And they had decided amongst themselves, this was in the 1970s, they said that they decided that anything an artist writes should be written with the urgency of what they would write if somebody were holding a gun in their mouth.
Wow.
And to me, that meant like, are these good enough to be my last words?
Right.
If I never share anything publicly again, will I be able to share this and go, so be it, take me? You know, and that's the test. That's the test for every poem. That's the test for every film. That's the test for every song. That's the test. That's the test that I put my own, you know, self through, of just like, could this be, you know, if a sniper came right at this moment, as soon as I, you know, hit send or whatever, am I cool? I'm cool. That's it. You know, I think Kurt Cobain put himself to the same test. You know what I'm saying? Like everything, there's no weak points is what I'm saying. There's no weak points in the delivery. There's everything is on a level. Right. His whole heart, his whole spirit, every question he ever had about why is humanity this way? Why Nina Simone put herself to the same test, you know? Right. So it's that. I'll leave you with that. And obviously we got to do a part two. There's so much we didn't talk. We didn't talk about Rick Rubin.
I know.
We didn't talk about,
you know, we must revisit. I want to also say I'm excited to see your Martin Luther King graphic comic, the way it was described. I saw some of it. You showed me some.
I showed you some of it. It comes out April 28th. And so I've been, it's actually already available for pre-order right now. It's called Martin Luther King. It's a graphic novel, but I haven't promoted it yet because the book company was like, we don't need to promote it until January. But if you type in Martin Luther King graphic novel, you'll find it already available for pre-order. Eventually, I'll start posting about it. So that's coming. It's 350 pages.
That's high power.
It's extraordinary. And all the information that you talk about in Neptune Frost, there's even more.
I'm sure, because illustrations allow you to expand even beyond what creative film does.
Yeah. It's another thing.
Even with the effects, you know?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of text in it as well.
True.
So there's that. And then there's the live album that I did with Carlos Nino that's coming out in August. I'm
digging that too. Yeah, that kind of sent me there. I was listening to
Monet. It's beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful. So yeah, that's beautiful. That's an improvised album.
Awesome.
That's an improvised album. I'm coming up short in terms of, I wanted to get my Leon Thomas on. Creator has a master plan. I wanted to do that, but it'll take some time to reach that. But we definitely Kamasi definitely hit that inner Pharaoh. There's some beautiful moments on that album. It's a live album. Like I said, completely improvised one night, December 18th, 2024. Speaking directly to the times, speaking directly from the heart about, what we're witnessing and what and how it's processed in connection to music and the presence of audience and all of that. So that's coming up next. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff. But yeah, bro.
Awesome. Saul, thank you so much for being a part of the Instinctive Midnight Theory podcast.
Oh,
we've had quite a few wonderful experiences on our journey as friendship. I want to thank you for being such a wonderful and inspiring friend. And I love you.
Love you, bro.
I look forward to seeing you again in person. We always have a good time.
Yeah,
but I want everyone.
Our tour is passing through Atlanta. I think our tour is passing through Atlanta. There's tour dates coming up in September, October. I think we're passing through Atlanta.
Oh, that's coming up.
Yeah. Because the album comes out in August, and then end of September, we hit the road. Me and Carlos.
Okay, I'm there.
Yeah. And Carlos produced the flute album. Carlos produced Andre's flute album.
So, oh, really? Okay. No, I didn't know that.
Carlos is the dude who produced Andre's flute album. So
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm catching the frequency. I get it.
You're catching the frequency now. You got it?
Yeah.
That was the Lyricless album, and now I'm
yes.
touting my lyrical flute.
There it is. Okay. I want everyone who's watching to follow Saul and get into what he's developing. And your social activism work is
I don't really call it activism. It's really, I really think of it as just an open notebook, bro. Like I said, I've always read the news thoroughly and I've always picked through shit, you know what I'm saying? But I didn't always share what I was reading. And now, because I think there's so much disinformation and propaganda, and we have to work on being able to discern and read between the lines. Me and many other people are doing their part in just sharing, giving a glimpse of like, no, this is the stuff as we see it. This is the proper way to think of this. This is, this is a start. This is all of that. And the most important thing, this is what's happening in Gaza, and this is what they're saying, like sharing their voices, By the way, I think that's my old TikTok that I got kicked off of. So I'm Saul Williams. I think it's 31 now. Okay,
good. Thank you for filling us in.
Yeah.
So yes, the sharing with us what's going on, the humanity work. It's important stuff.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Instinctive Midnight Theory. If you heard something that moved you, share it, tag it, build with it. Culture only grows when we grow it together. Until next time, stay fresh, stay rooted, and keep your story in motion.